Hello, and welcome to this virtual tour of the Allegan County Zoning Atlas. A zoning atlas is an interactive map that shows the zoning regulations of every community, and in this case, the zoning regulations specifically that address how and where we permit housing. This tool is part of a national project to make zoning more accessible, especially around housing, and it's been brought to you by the Allegan County Community Foundation. My name is Leah Dumichel, and I'm the Director of Programs and Communications at the Michigan Association of Planning. We're the state chapter of the American Planning Association, a 501c3 that provides information, education, and advocacy to our more than 4,000 members, which we've been doing for more than 75 years. We have been the state team lead for the National Zoning Atlas Project, and we're working to understand the zoning for housing across the entire state. We've been working on a county-by-county basis, and we deeply commend the Allegan County and its foundation for making this incredibly foresightful investment into a new tool to understand zoning and to get that tool into the hands of the county's housers and its land use decision makers. This work that we're about to see was done by the National Zoning Atlas team. This is the first West Michigan county to be completed outside of our three-county pilot program, which was completed by our organization in partnership with the University of Michigan. So now, without further ado, let me introduce you to it. When you first get to the atlas, this is what you'll see: a map and two boxes to help you navigate it and get the information that you're looking for out of it. We'll start with this zoom to box, and we will zoom to our state of Michigan and to the metropolitan area of Holland and to the county of Allegan. You can zoom out a little. You can see the other counties that were done here, but we don't have to. We can hide that zoning and just focus on Allegan County if we'd like to. Just looking at then what we see here kind of as the county as a whole to orient ourselves. These legend and layer options use the same key for everyone in the whole country. So this light purple means it is a primarily residential zoning district. These darker purple colors mean that the residential district, that residential uses are permitted, but it is mixed with other uses. And there is a peachy color that you can see usually when you get closer, although there are a couple of areas here that are non-residential areas. In addition to the zoning information, the map includes a little bit of information about unbuildable areas. So there are tribal lands, there are protected lands, and they're off by default, but you can click on FEMA flood zones. And in places where, in some places, you can get information on transit. Again, the zoning information is specifically housing focused. What we see here summarizes an analysis of about 107 variables related to housing, which the team obtained by reading every single zoning ordinance in the county and answering questions like, is one family housing permitted here? What are the setbacks? What's the required lot coverage? Is an accessory dwelling unit permitted? Are there occupancy restrictions? Those are the kinds of questions that were answered in order to inform this tool. So now let's take a look at some findings for Allegan County. So there are a handful of questions that the Atlas makes it super easy to answer for anyone. And that question starts with, show me where people can build. So in our county, again, leaning back a little bit so we can see the whole thing, where can we build single-family homes? In a lot of places. Where can we build only single-family homes and no other type of housing? Not as much area, but certainly quite a bit. Where can we build single-family homes on small lots? Oh, the picture constrains significantly here. And here I want to point out another little feature. You may be asking when I said that, okay, what do you mean by a small lot? By clicking on this I for more information here next to it, we can get a sense of what the rules are that were used to create each of these categories. So a small lot shows where rules allow a single housing unit, whether detached, semi-detached, or attached, on less than a quarter acre of land by right. How about where can we build missing middle housing? A little bit more there. And again, what do we mean by that? Where the rules allow 2, 3, and or 4 more units of housing to be built in the same structure as of right. How about apartments, meaning just the 4 more units? Much less there. Accessory dwelling units, some variation from community to community. How about housing without parking? Again, some variation from community to community. That without parking is an interesting variable for us to look at because so two parking spaces plus the maneuvering lanes takes up about 750 or so square feet of space, which if you have it and you need it is one thing. And if you don't, that could be a two-bedroom apartment's worth of space that is devoted just to parking. So, looking at the county as a whole is interesting in this spatial way, but we have learned, a handful of things. I'll reset my filters here that we might want to know sort of more specific statistics about. So while we might see a lot of area that is devoted to one thing, that it's not the same as having an understanding of what the exact proportions are. So we're going to come down here right underneath the map to this county snapshot, and a new window will open that tells us information that is specific to Allegan County. So scrolling down here, we see this is the county zoning snapshot. We've analyzed 33 jurisdictions, all of which have zoning in the county. That took 5,280 pages of zoning text, which is used as a little bit of a proxy for understanding how deep and complex the zoning regulations are over a series of communities. In those 33 districts, 320, in those 33 jurisdictions, 328 districts were analyzed. So let's come down to our zoning categories here. So looking at the county as a whole, we can see that of those 328 districts, 98% of them, 92% allow primarily residential, 6% allow uses that are mixed with residential. So a total of 98% of our districts, of our land, allows some kind of housing. And more than 9 in 10 of the districts, no, more than 92%, are dedicated mostly to housing. So if we have a housing shortage, which we do, we can see that at least we have plenty of space for housing where it's legally permitted. And our next question will be, okay, well, how are we using that space? Well, on the 98% of zoned land that allows housing, almost all of it, more than 99%, allows a single family home. So great. But as you know, for a time when housing costs and affordability are the primary concern for many communities, it is worth pointing out that this is the most expensive type of housing to build. It's the most expensive type of housing to serve with infrastructure, and it's the most expensive type of housing to maintain, both in terms of the housing itself and in terms of the infrastructure. So that's important to keep in mind. Just under a third of our residential land, 24% plus 8%, allows some kind of two-family housing development. That's helpful because it can effectively halve the cost of housing for a given household, although of course it would take a separate analysis to understand how much of this housing that we have or our building it actually has 2 units on a parcel. And then after that, the picture constrains really significantly. Just under 1% of our residential land allows for more than 2 units on a property. That is a very small percentage, and it does not display a whole lot of housing diversity. What else can we learn? What about accessory dwelling units? Those are permitted on really just 12% of residential land, 8%, 11% with some occupancy restrictions, and just 1% with no occupancy restriction. On 89% of the property throughout the entire county, it's not allowed at all. Accessory dwelling units are often a good place to start looking for some housing diversity because they implement very slowly. They allow individual property owners to be in charge of and to benefit from neighborhood densification. The size of the lot that we legally require directly affects the cost of housing in a couple of ways. One, the land has its own cost. And 2, the size of the dwelling usually has some proportional relationship to the size of the lot. So the majority of the residentially zoned land in the county has the largest lot size measured, 55%, that requires more than 2 acres. Single-family homes on quarter-acre lots are just as restricted as 4 or more apartment units at less than 1% of the land. But 12% has no minimum lot size at all, which has a lot of flexibility to it. The last thing that this snapshot shows is the percentage of residential land that has a minimum parking requirement, which is 91% in Allegan County. And again, as we mentioned, those two parking spaces plus the maneuvering lanes take up a significant space requirement. So where flexibility can be provided, that is a good tool for communities to start looking at to allow for some more housing. So there is the zoning snapshot. We're going to come back over to the zoning atlas here, and we are going to talk about a couple of ways that we could start using the atlas today. I'd first like to talk about how the atlas can fit into the development process as it exists today. So in the decade that I spent as a planning consultant, I found that the initial site selection, this conversation about what's allowed where, to be just one of the most challenging things from both sides of the counter. It was frustrating to me as the professional because it seemed that I had to personally deliver even the most simple of answers, even at the easiest of the project stages. It was frustrating to the person across from me because they understandably wanted to be able to do some of their work on their own and to draw some conclusions that didn't have to be personally validated. And it didn't seem to matter what kind of community I was in, whether it was a big community or a small community, there never seemed to be quite enough capacity to do as much of that work as any given community could have benefited from. So I think that this is a helpful tool. It is helpful to be added to the conversation in all kinds of communities. I do want to say clearly, and I'll say this again, this is not going to replace every visit between a developer to a planner's counter. It's most certainly not going to replace the last one where everybody finds out what needs to happen and how to do it in this particular community. But we do think it could take the pressure off the first few visits when a person is just trying to understand the scope of what's possible and where. So I'm going to step into the shoes of developer, maybe a brand new developer, the kind that we really need to bring into the game in order to meet our housing shortage. We just don't have the capacity right now, or else we might be in a different place. And so we need to have new tools to make this easier to access for new people. So let's start with this question. I am a big advocate for duplexes. This is just true. I live in one. I think its flexibility is really meeting the moment. And as a planner, I think there are some of the most gentle density that is available while really having the potential to impact both availability and affordability. So I'm going to use this atlas to look around and see where I could build this great housing type that I like so much. So to do that, I have zoomed into Allegan County. And now I'm going to go down to these advanced filters and I'm going to click on two family. And I'm going to see just where that's allowed. Here are all of my opportunities for building two-family housing by right in Allegan County. How about by a public hearing? That is classified as maybe allowed in this tool. And if you have ever shepherded a project through the public hearing process, maybe you will see the wisdom of that classification. I see I get a few more opportunities if I click the maybes on and off. But to tell you the truth, I'm a new developer in this little scenario, and I'm kind of scared of a public hearing. I would rather not face one if I don't have to. And this tool will tell me where I can build my duplex such that I don't have to face a public hearing. How about if I want to build my duplex with no parking requirements? So if I click this on, it by default shows me where there are parking requirements. And then I can change it to no and see where I can build my duplex without them. That constrains my picture pretty significantly, and that's not a top priority for me. So I'm going to remove this criteria from my search here. And now I'm going to see all the opportunities, whether or not there are parking requirements. Just out of curiosity, let's see about small lot development. I'm going to pick 3,000 square feet, just about a quarter of an acre. Look at that again. Boy, there's no place that I can build a duplex on a quarter of an acre. Okay, well, I'm not going to pursue that either. I'll just go ahead and take that right off. And now I'm going to take my opportunities as I see them. So taking a look around, let's just say that I'm kind of interested in a mixed use environment. I would like my duplex to be near commercial amenities. I would like it to contribute to good planning principles by having denser development support the commercial environment. So just taking a look around, I kind of see some opportunity over here on the west side. I see a long mixed use corridor here in the dark purple, and I see another corridor up here. So I'm going to scroll in a little bit and just kind of take a look closer at these communities. As I mouse over, I can see that I am looking at Ganges Township. I can see that I am looking at Douglas. I can see that I'm looking at Saugatuck, both the city and the township. This all by itself is an interesting development here. So being able to see that where a duplex is allowed, the geography of where a duplex is allowed in four different municipalities, and it's actually more than that, but I'm considering four, in one glance is a huge improvement. The process as it exists right now, if I wanted to do that, is the best case scenario is that I would have to Google and I would have to get to the website of all four of these municipalities. I would have to hope that their zoning ordinance and their zoning map, they don't always come together, are both on the website. I would have to download them all. I would have to read through every district to see where two-family dwelling units are permitted, and then I would have to match from the text onto the map, and then I would have to stitch all four of those maps together, at least in my mind or imagination, and then I would have to kind of compare what I saw on the color-coded zoning map to what's actually on the ground and see whether any of this is worth pursuing any further. The best case scenario is that that's going to take me a few hours to put together what you're seeing right on this screen right now, and in a worst case scenario, it might take me a few days. What if that ordinance isn't updated? What if it's not on the website? What if I have to go drive there anyways and get that personal advice that we were talking about earlier? So just on this screen right here, we can see a move toward what we're trying to make more accessible. Just answer my question. Where can I build a duplex that we can see on the map? So I'm going to start by just mousing around these districts. So if anything is colored right now, it means I can put my duplex on it. So if I roll my mouse over it, I'm just going to see what kinds of districts we're looking at. And there's lots of opportunities, right? So I can build it in this commercial district. I can build them in these residential agricultural districts. This whole corridor is zoned commercial. Maybe moving up, I see an agricultural residential context here, but again, I'm looking for something more mixed use. There's a C2 general commercial, a local commercial that allows my duplex, and a C2 general commercial down here in Douglas. Okay, well, there's a few ideas. In order to look a little closer, I'm going to go back up to my legend and layer options and notice that it allows me to click on the imagery. So now I can see what's actually built there underneath it. I can get a sense of the context. I'm going to turn down my opacity of the zoning a little bit so I can still see the difference between the light purple and the dark purple, but I can also see what's underneath it. And let's start with this long corridor down here. I'm going to zoom all the way in, make it a little bit lighter, and I'm just going to take a little Google tour of what this corridor looks like. It is not particularly developed right now. I'm just kind of, again, looking up and down. I see some settlement here, a little bit more. Zooming out. This just really isn't quite the context that I have in mind. I'm to the end of the commercial corridor here. I never did see any kind of, concentration of amenities here. There's a little bit at this node, but I can see the buildings are pretty big. The parking lots are pretty big. This just isn't quite the developed context that I had in mind. That's good information for me to have. I can cross this off my list. I don't need to look, any more deeply into this corridor. I was able to see everything I needed to see to kind of save my time going forward from right here. So let's head north a little bit on my walk and let's take a look at this Blue Star Highway corridor that I noticed before. I'm just going to move from north to south here on my little walk that I've been taking. I see some more development here. I see the district is C2, general commercial, but I'm really just kind of looking at the pattern underneath it. I see, again, some big development, parking lots. haven't actually been here, so I don't really know what these are. I'm just kind of looking at the size and to see if the context is what I had in mind. And it's not really. Even though there's more here, this is not quite the little duplex outside of a downtown that I was hoping for. Okay, we're still following the corridor. We're making the hop from one community to another, just in a very seamless way. Now we're down here in Douglas. And I see, oh, okay, this is an area that's a little bit more of what I had in mind. We have neighborhoods supporting it. It looks like there's, kind of some close together development that might suggest commercial here and there. I can't tell if there's a lot of opportunity because it looks pretty densely developed and I don't yet know what remains. But I did get enough information to put this on my list as hopeful, right? Now I feel good about going and driving this corridor to see where it looks like there might be a good space for my project, or in fact, the look and feel on the ground is the same as what I think that it is here. So I have narrowed this down to a stretch of corridor from two whole municipalities plus two whole townships. And that is also including my earlier legwork. So really, I have condensed what is often a very sort of like long drawn out scattershot process into a much more tightly focused one. So I'm going to turn this back to plain. I'm going to turn my opacity back up and I am going to reset all of my filters here and I'll zoom back out, having taken this for a spin in one way. Now I'm going to do this in a slightly different way. Let's just say, because it's true, that I once worked tangentially on a project for the city of Wayland, and I've learned a little bit about it, and I think I might like to do a housing project there. In this example, I haven't really decided on what kind of project I want to build, but instead I want to look around and I want to see what kinds of housing that they allow, and then I will look into that. I'm a new developer. I'm not constrained by my history, and so I really have the flexibility to see what kinds of skills I would like to develop. So here we're going to go back to our Zoom 2. We're in Allegan County, and we're going to zoom right into the city of Wayland. So when I select that, it draws a big black box around the jurisdiction for me. It shows me a few little facts about it. But this time, I'm not going to stay here in the map view. I'm going to scroll downwards to these, what they are called zoning cards. So these summarize the permitted housing uses in every district in the city. So just kind of looking around first, I can see that 2+ units of housing are largely permitted in the local business district. So in the B2 general business, B1, the central business district allows it. There is even prohibited in the regional commercial, permitted by public hearing in this planned unit district. So we have a PUD. There's a couple of those. I just want to take a look at just the regular old residential density districts to see what kind of diversity is allowed there. So I see that there are about 7 residential districts and that 5 of them really only permit single family housing in those districts. I can also see, in addition to what's allowed, I can see the acreage of each district, which gives me a sense of how widespread each choice is. So by far, the most acreage is the single family. We have 375 acres here, low density plus single family, 372 acres here. There's a good substantial area of single and two family, 194 acres. But then after that, again, it constrains pretty significantly. Just 3 acres for this single family manufactured housing, just 6 acres for attached single family, and only 52 for the multiple family residential. So really, when I take that into consideration, it looks like actually, much to my surprise and delight, the best opportunity here may be for my duplex. So let's take a look at this R2. I'm going to click on this Show More Details. And this card comes up that really has some zoning magic in it. It contains many of the dimensional standards that will apply to the district, or at least indicates whether or not they exist in the zoning ordinance, and does the same for other regulations that are often found sort of in disparate parts of the zoning ordinance. This is the part of the atlas that contains most of those 100 or so variables that the coders, who were, trained researchers, looked through the code to find. They found them diligently once so that this tool can use them many, many, many times. So here we can learn what the minimum lot size is, whether or not there are parking requirements, whether or not there's a height family, and in areas that permit three or more family housing, it will also tell us whether or not there are infrastructure connectivity requirements that we should go chasing through the ordinance for. It does not, again, display every single dimensional standard. It does indicate whether or not they exist so that it really narrows down what we're searching for and also helps point us to where we can find it. If we click on this zoom to the district, it'll take us right back to the map and it'll take us right back to the map so we can take a look there. All right, then. We have had one demonstration that you might want to do if you are just the most casual of observers. Any interested party can take a look through these, show me where people can build and get some information. We've kind of taken two deep dives into how a developer might use this tool. And I just want to share one more example with you of how a community might like to use this tool. So I'm going to put my planner hat back on now. I'm going to step back around to the other side of the counter, and we're going to talk about how we might use this information from that perspective. In this example, I'm going to ponder what I can learn from my neighboring communities about permitting accessory dwelling units. So let's say that my community is looking into developing an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. We've had some recent work with our master plan. We've let the Planning Commission know that it's a community priority, our public has, and the Planning Commission has heard them and said, okay, we're ready to turn that engagement finding into policy and regulation. So a lot of places, many communities start with this, with any project of this type, is to say, okay, well, what are our neighbors doing? This is helpful. This is a helpful approach for two reasons. One, because we can learn from each other. My absolute favorite kind of mistake to learn from is somebody else's mistake. So any lessons learned gathered here is nothing but gain on our side. And also because housing is really a regional concern. The systems are regional, the control is local. So in order to make that function the best, some kind of coordination smooths the path. Often a community would like to know what their neighbors permit and how, and more importantly, how that's actually going. So let's take a look at what we can learn. If we go to our accessory dwelling units, it looks like really the majority of the county does not permit them now, which we learned on the zoning snapshot. So let's say maybe there are advocates either inside the communities or around them who want to know where they're permitted and how so that we can start knowledgeably recommending those changes in other places. All right, so just starting with our advanced filters. So this is showing us where accessory dwelling units are permitted and where they're permitted by right. How about where they are permitted by special land use with a public hearing? So if I click that off and on, I can see that the districts, where they are permitted by special land use with a public hearing, they're just in a couple of places. They are largely in Fenville here, and then a little piece here in either Douglas or Saugatuck Township. Is hard to tell which. So interestingly, we can see that really most of the county permits, if they're going to permit them, they choose to permit them by right without going through the public hearing process. That's interesting to know. Let's leave these both on so we have all the places that they're permitted. And let's start to look at our occupancy restrictions. Where we permit ADUs, do we require some kind of occupancy restriction? And by an occupancy restriction, what we mean is things like whether the owner of the property is required to live there, whether or not the owner of the property is required to live there, whether the two relations in the primary and accessory dwelling units are required to be related to each other. Sometimes there are accessory dwelling units in commercial areas that are required to be occupied by the employee. Those are what we mean by occupancy restrictions here. And those are in place. So we click on yes here. In some of our opportunities, how about no? And occupancy restrictions are not in place, also in a handful of them. And if I just kind of click those back and forth one more time to sort of take a look at the differences, it looks like there are occupancy restrictions on kind of the wider swaths of land, just in general. And there are not occupancy restrictions in some of the more tightly controlled mixed use districts because we see that they are dark purple. So for any of these combinations, no, so this is all the places that this is the all the places that they're permitted and without occupancy restrictions. If we take off the maybe, these are the most permissive conditions. These are the ways in which we control them the least. And you can look at any of these areas, Saugatuck Township, Door, Allegan, and read their ordinances, find out how they wrote it, call up their planner, find out how it's working, see how the process went for allowing it, see how it's been implementing, see how it's working. Maybe we would like to be the most restrictive and we would like to understand how that's working. So we will click on our public hearings, we will click on our occupancy restrictions, and we will see that that left us just a tiny little area here in the community of Douglas. That is the place that we would go for that. But maybe that is the place we would go for a comparison. But maybe just this information tells us that actually we don't need to be that restrictive. Almost nobody else is. And so maybe we can just take that right off the table in our decision making. That these are the kinds of conversations that can happen inside your working group using this tool to ground that conversation. So those are largely the examples that I have to show to you today. But before I turn you loose to explore the atlas on your own, I do want to point you to where you can get a refresher on much of what I talked about today. Up here, underneath the resources, the NZA tutorial gives you a handful of things that we did talk about, not the examples, but the instructions. So how to find a geography, how to run a query, how to use those advanced filters to go a little deeper, how to really get to know the individual districts through the pop-up cards on the map and the big zoning card that I showed you. We didn't talk about this, but there are also ways to share your findings. They make that very easy on the right-hand side of your screen to pop out a JPEG or a PDF of what you're looking at so that you may share, or a link of what you're looking at so that you may share it. And if your learning style is more video, then it is kind of scroll through. Then there's another video here made by the NZA team that could maybe get you into a couple of different corners. The last couple of things that I want to say here is that, again, it really bears repeating that this is a high-level tool that makes no guarantees good enough to base an investment decision on. It is for the early part of the process. Everyone who worked on this was well-trained and diligent, but mistakes, of course, happen. And more importantly, for our purposes, change happens. And we hope that it does. One of the most exciting things to me about the Atlas is the new understanding that we can now have about how our land is used in the aggregate. This information did not exist before. No one knew the percentage of land in the county as a whole that was dedicated solely to single-family zoning, for example. And now we do. So I am looking forward to learning how Allegan County puts those opportunities to work to house your current and future residents. And I hope you have found this tool and the instruction helpful. You feel free to reach out to us anytime at the Michigan Association of Planning, info@planningmi.org. My name is Leah DuMichel, and of course, connect with Allegan County through the foundation and through the county itself to understand the opportunities that are on the ground there for you. Thank you so much. Take care.